Hey, before we get into today's episode, I have a couple things to note. First of all, this is going to be part one of a two-part episode. I had my friends Cari and Jenève and Noah on the show to talk about our friendships and how they've lasted from us being little kids to now us being in our 30s. And it was such a great conversation that it went on for almost 2 hours. And so as I was editing, I figured, you know what, let's just split this thing almost right down the middle. And I get 2 weeks of content out of it, but also it makes it a little bit more digestible for you guys. And so that's what we're doing. This part one, we're talking about our friendships, how we got to know each other, some of the things that built our lasting friendships, and then next week we'll get into some more topics as well. The second thing to note is that book club is actively happening. We are reading Educated by Tara Westover. This is a great read, a great story about a little girl who never goes to school until she's 17 and goes to college. And so, yeah, a fantastic read, and it's not too late to join book club and read this with us. So, a couple ways to do that. One, pick up the book, Educated by Tara Westover. Two, you can enter our discussion group. We have like a discussion board on the Fable app. Link for that will be down in the description below. And three is to register for our like hangout Zoom session that we do at the end of the month. It's going to be on the 29th of August. And we just talk about the book and what we liked, what we didn't like, things we related to, our own homeschool experiences, and we just get to know each other a little bit better. And so if any of those things appeal to you, links for all that stuff is going to be down below. If you're listening to this and it's not August, do not fear, book club is a normal thing around here, and so those links will get you to whatever the new book club book is, whatever is happening with the book club will be like all updated down in the show notes below. Third and final thing I'm going to ask you guys to do is like, comment, subscribe, share this episode with a friend. If you get anything out of any of the episodes I put out on this podcast, I appreciate so much when you guys do any of the internet things that we already know how to do, because it really does go so far in making the show reach more people. And so I appreciate you guys for doing that. I'm going to shut up now and turn it over to Past Jacob, and we'll get into a conversation around friendship. What is good, my ex-homies? It's your boy Jacob Gooden. We're back for another week in the Ex-Homeschoolers Club, and today is really special because today we're talking about friendship, and I brought back some people that we've been friends for a long time, and we're going to talk about, like, friendships that last not only through childhood, but into adulthood, and so my good friend Cari is back with us. Hey, Cari.
Hi.
And she is a repeat offender, as you guys know, and so one of my favorite people from my homeschool experience. And so her and I are going to talk more about our friendship, but also I have Noah and Jenève, and we are going to talk about their friendship. And so we've got kind of this like East Coast, West Coast thing going on today, and so it's going to be fun. We're going to have a really good time. And so with that, I'm going to start by I'm going to give us all an opportunity to kind of like break down our homeschool experience really quickly. If you guys want a little bit more in depth, I have interviews with each and every one of them, and those are going to be linked down below. So, with that, Cari, quickly walk us through your homeschool experience. What's the nutshell form? Give people a taste of what they can expect.
Okay. So I was homeschooled my entire life up until college, and it started with I don't even know how it started, but my parents felt like they were supposed to homeschool me, and so we joined a local homeschool group, and that is how I met Jacob. And we did bi-weekly classes together. We did a lot of extracurricular activities together. A lot of my homeschool journey actually involved way more extracurricular activities than it did a lot of the general education. So a lot of mime, theater, dance, singing. I come from a very musical family, and so a lot of our homeschool events and learning opportunities were based on that. And I was very fortunate to actually have Jacob's mom as a teacher at one point. We did a British literature class, and that's how we just became really fast friends. And my dad is a guitar teacher, so he was Jacob's guitar teacher, and so we were intertwined from a very young age. But yeah, I was homeschooled my whole life, and that was a big culture shock for me, going to college and seeing how the real world operated as far as education and just general things that I didn't experience growing up. But it became it really helped me, I think, going into my future, and I wouldn't change it if I had the chance to go back. So
Yeah, yeah,
that's a little bit
yeah.
about Me, popcorn version.
Yeah, like Carrie said, we've known each other for a very long time. It's like we both, yeah, we're homeschooled. I was second grade, but yeah, it was, yeah, we've known each other because, yeah, your parents were my teachers, my parents were your teachers. We did groups together. We did all kinds of different stuff. We
Yep.
went to prom together. We like lots of different things
Yep.
that, if you want to listen to our previous conversations, we talk about all of this stuff in much more depth. But yeah, we've been friends for a very, very long time. So.
Yeah.
Jenève, I'm going to hand it over to you. Tell us a little,
Yeah.
give us the quick popcorn version of your homeschool experience, and then maybe a little bit about how you know Noah, and then we'll go to Noah.
Mm. Well, you just reiterated how the West Coast is the best coast because we didn't even get a prom. So, um, yeah. So, my name's Jenève. I grew up in a family of 5 kids. I was the oldest, like Noah mentioned, but we were homeschooled on the East Coast in North Jersey, part of the North Jersey Homeschoolers Association. So it was like organized homeschooling, I would say, but like on the smaller scale, like in my house, it was definitely more of like a looser homeschooling style as far as like when it came to curriculum and, schedule and stuff like that. But similar to Cari, I was super into theater and music and art. And I think, like, for me, the homeschooling format, if you can even call it that, was really good for me to be able to lean into those interests more than I may have been able to in public school. I don't know. I mean, yeah, no one knows, but anyway. So I feel like I have a generally positive view of my homeschool upbringing, but like I'm always willing to talk about like the downsides and also like the differences and different people's experiences. So that's why I love doing this stuff. But yeah, that's me.
Very cool. Yeah, and in our interview, we talk a lot about like the creative aspects of how that was.
Mm.
It really was like a big part for both of us. Like the creative stuff was a
Yeah.
large part of our homeschool experience, and and so that
Mm.
it's a pro. It's and so and it helped shape us as people. And so I'm
Yeah.
with you. I think most of us here are pro homeschool as far as like our experiences go. But with that kind of caveat of like we also can see some of the negative stuff that impacted us. So
Hmm.
Noah, I don't want to leave you out. Give us the down low of your homeschool experience. Was it all the way through? Well, give us a little taste of it.
Yeah, like Jenève said, I was in that NJHSA group. Originally, we started in New York. My mom was teaching at like a public school when she had my older sister. I'm one of four. I'm the second oldest. And when she had my older sister, she felt like, actually, it was my dad who was like, I think you're not happy with the school system that you're in right now. I think you could probably do it better on your own. Why don't you just homeschool our kids for yourself and see how we like it? Um, and so we started, and then I had my younger sister, or my parents had my younger sister, and then right before we had my fourth, or like my younger brother, we moved to Jersey, and that was a big shift as far as homeschooling goes, because New York is pretty like strict with like doing standardized tests. In Jersey, you could really do whatever you want, and then like when it comes to the SATs and when you're applying for school, then that's when the government is like, all right, let's show us proof that your kids know what they're doing. So it was a real game changer. But fortunately, like I feel like I lucked out because my mom was an actual teacher and she knew what the criteria was and she knew how to like find curriculum and stuff. But yeah, so we've ended up in the NJHSA and like you guys and like we talked about on the podcast, like I am like a creative. I work in like the visual arts field, and so that worked out really well for me. I feel like, um, and that's where I met Jenève in Jersey and her family, and we were pretty close. We hung out a bunch and did like a bunch of extracurricular activities. We did classes together. We uh, sometimes it was at each other's houses. Sometimes it was like at co-ops and stuff like that at different locations. And then when it was time for me to go to college, that's when I had my first experience in like a real school setting when I took the SATs. Um, yeah, and then that was like my entire life of being a homeschooler.
And then you were out. You were out of the
And I
bubble
was out.
finally.
Yeah.
I'm curious, like, do you guys, for Noah and Geneva specifically, do you guys have a memory of like when you became friends or how you guys met, because like I've been thinking a lot about that with like me and Carrie's relationship, and it's hard for me to pinpoint an exact moment. There's certain people in my life who I'm like, I know exactly where I met you, I remember what you were wearing, like kind of a thing. But for Carrie it's like this kind of a little nebulous, because like her dad was my guitar teacher, and I'm like, was it through that or was it through like skate day or something like that? But do you guys remember how or when you guys met?
Well, I'm already feeling terrible as a friend because I was like totally forgot to say anything about how Noah and I met each other. So that's cool.
Well, it's good. It gave me
I
something to talk about.
There you go.
Otherwise, I would have just repeated what you said. I
Yeah.
think
So
was it
sorry about
Awana?
that.
Was that the first thing that we did, or
Whoa,
were
did
we
you do
friends before
Awana
that?
too? I forgot about that.
Apparently,
Yeah.
you don't remember. I
Apparently,
remember
I'm
your.
self-absorbed.
I remember like it was. It felt like every month there was like another Dubé kid coming in, like another baby coming in. I remember
Yeah.
your siblings, like yeah.
I was gonna say
But
our families definitely like hung out a lot, and it was like different. I definitely like Noah mentioned his older sister, and we've talked about this since then, like as adults, but there was always this pressure of like I'm the oldest girl and she's the oldest girl, we should be friends, and then like there's the weird complex of like when you're the older sibling, like you're like the littler kids or like they should find their own friends. But I think it was interesting about Noah because like the age wise, he was like in between like me and my next sibling. And so there was, I think, like in a lot of ways, Noah was like this bridge of like, even all the way back then, of like, we can all hang together because like it's fun. But it was just, yeah, I think it was a little nebulous, kind of like you were saying too. But I will also say that like my best like friendships, I weirdly don't usually remember a beginning to them. And I think that's part of just like my personality. I'm sort of like, oh, you've just always been here, right? Like you've just always
Yeah.
been like in my life. Yeah, that's my
yeah,
take. I don't know what you'd say.
Do you have
Noah.
anything to add to that, Noah?
I was gonna say I don't remember when we met because it was just we were definitely like I think closest with your family like for the
Mm.
like still continue like our brothers are still friends and stuff like that and like our
I
you,
remembered. Sorry.
you remember when we met?
Yeah, you did a
Okay.
karate presentation at Awana. That's that's like how I remember
Hell
it.
yeah.
Great.
That-
Oh, I remember that. No, I remember practicing in the backyard and like trying to like chop the wood and
Yep.
everything like that.
I was like,
And
whoa, that guy's cool. It's like he like chopped wood like at Awana. I was like, cool. So funny.
Oh.
oh my God. Yeah.
Carrie, do you remember how we met? Like, I think about this a lot, and I'm like, there's certain moments that I remember. Like, I do, I remember obviously going to your dad's studio. I know that we recorded stuff together. Her dad's like an amazing guitar player, just musician in general, and owns a recording studio, and so
Cool.
taught me guitar lessons. But her and her sisters are very musically talented, and so we would record stuff and we make albums, and you guys have made some incredible music. But
Whoa.
aside from that, like, do you have I don't know. To Jeff's point, I'm like, I feel like it's just like this nebulous. We've known each other for forever.
Well, like Jenève said, your best friendships don't really have a memorable, I mean, not all the time, but for myself, like my best friendships don't have like a distinct memory of like that's when I met you. Like you've kind of just always been there, like you, your family, like from early days at Group Solutions, which was the co-op that we did bi-weekly. Those were definitely I have some key memories of like bonding during those times when we were just I feel like we were in junior high at that point. I can't quite ages are really hard for me to remember, but I feel like we were in
Yeah.
junior high and that was a lot of big there's a lot of bonding happening and we were becoming friends. We were stronger friends at that point. But earlier than that, I just know you were working for my dad, helping him in his studio, getting guitar lessons. Like there was just your presence was always there. And it
Yeah.
just made sense even up to when we went to prom. It was like, oh, like this absolutely makes sense that we go together because we're friends and this is what friends do. And, you know, so no, I really don't have a distinct memory in my mind of the day that I was like, oh, let's be, it was just, Jacob was always there.
Yeah. No, there's like people in my life that I'm like, I remember going up to them in line or something being like, I want to be your friend. Carrie's not one of those people.
Yeah.
Like, it just, like you
Yeah.
were saying, like, it very much is just this very natural, organic, like, we were around each other a lot. And so whether that was
Yeah.
theater or music or whatever, it just ended up where it was like, oh yeah, this just makes sense. And like your best friend and my best friend were like, the four of us were all friends and we all went to prom together and like
Yeah.
stuff like that. And so it just kind of, yeah, it just kind of became this
Made
very
sense.
natural friendship. I'm curious, I want to get everybody's take on this. Is there a specific memory that stands out to you the most of like with that other person? And I'll give an example of this. So Cari and I, like, Cari is one of my only friends who's ever come on family vacation with me, and almost everybody else. And it's so funny because the way Cari sits and like Cari and I are very close in age. My sister's 3 years younger. And so, you know, it's funny because like Jenève, you said like, you know, there's that sibling thing of like you're friends with this person. And so this family vacation, it was like everybody gets to bring a friend. Madison chose Cari. I got to choose a guy friend. He couldn't come. So it just ended up being Cari. And we had this great time. That trip really, I feel like that was the close knitness that became like your family and my family became truly family in a lot of ways, because Cari got to see us at our worst and we maybe got to see Cari at her worst. And so anyway, it was definitely one of those things where, but the memory I have is that we drove up together and a bee got in the car. And my sister is losing her mind, and Cari is just trying to like calm my sister down while I'm driving the car. And so, yeah, definitely like freaking out a little bit on that. But it was so funny because Cari definitely, I don't know, that just solidifies in my memory of like we're friends because she's trying to help me out, calm my sister down. And yeah, definitely just, I don't know, it's a good memory. Yeah.
That trip had a whole theme of insects, like, and bugs, I feel like, because there was also a bee that tried to chase me while we were sitting by the water, and I like flung myself to try to get away from the bee, and no one saw the bee, but they saw me just fall on my butt right in front of everyone, just flinging myself, and they were like, what are you doing?
That I forgot about that, but yeah, no, that was hilarious too. That trip was just, I think, a big, like I was saying, I think we got to see each other like at our best and also like at our worst to some degree, like, and so
Yeah.
it just was fun. It just was like that, like we were in the mountains. There's no cell service. There was no internet. There was no TV. Like it was just genuinely like we have to play cards. We have to like go to the lake. We have to like just do stuff that's very like human in a lot of senses, right? And so I think it just kind of brought that out in us. But
I think that's a big benefit of homeschooling in general. Like so many, I'm realizing now as a teacher, like when I see the kids out in the wild, you know, or like at a like walking, they're like, huh? They're like, you don't live here? And like I never had that thought of like, oh, the teachers just live at the school because like we were always at people's homes. And I feel like,
right.
you know, like seeing the natural, just real life stuff was like really helped me see other people as like, oh, even teachers or adults and other people, like they have lives outside of this, which is kind of cool.
No, is there a memory you have of like Jenève that's just like that one that burns in your memory of like it could be a funny moment, it could be a sad moment, whatever it is.
I mean, the earliest, there were so many that they kind of blurred a little bit together, but like one of the things that we used to do as kids was we would play like the watermelon game in her pool in the backyard where you like lather up, you put Vaseline or like butter on a watermelon and you're each trying to like fight over it on teams in a pool. But
I was gonna say, I don't think
I've
anyone knows
never
what that
played
game
this
is.
game.
It sounds so
Yeah, I
fun,
didn't.
though.
Yeah, it was like a 4th of July tradition, but then we definitely played it more. But the game, we had an in-ground pool in our backyard, and we would take a bunch of Crisco and grease a watermelon and then throw it in the pool. And there was 2 teams, and the goal of the game was for one team to get the watermelon up out of the pool on the opposing team's side. So super safe.
So kind of capture,
really cool
kind of capture
game.
the flag-esque, like
Yeah,
a little bit of like football mixed in there. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
the only other time I've ever heard of anybody doing that though was like in an episode of Always Sunny, and like Frank has a watermelon, like Danny DeVito has and he throws it in, and then like And then like the next scene cuts, and he's like, "I'm gonna be the watermelon now," and he starts lathering himself up with like Crisco, and it's just disgusting. You're like, "No,
This
buddy,
must be an
no."
East Coast thing because I have
Maybe.
I've
Oh, that's so
never
funny.
heard of that before.
That's
Like,
really
yeah,
funny.
we
Same.
we played normal pool games
Genius.
like Marco Polo.
Sounds fun.
Yeah, but now I'm wanting to play what do you the watermelon game? Is that what it's
Yeah,
called?
that's all we
Real
called
creative
it.
name.
Yeah.
Catch me in my apartment pool with no one else there, but just me greasing up a watermelon, just like trying this thing out.
That's
So
hilarious. No,
great.
bring your apartment together by being like we're
Yeah,
playing
this is the
watermelon
watermelon
sports in
game.
the
Yeah.
pool.
Yeah, you don't tell your friends when you're hosting them over, and you're just like, "We're just
Yeah,
actually gonna play this
exactly.
game," and they're like, "What?"
No, that's the best actually is when you bring your friends together and you tell them like we're gonna play a game or you tell them we're gonna do something special, but you don't tell them what it is, and then you reveal it when they're there. Yeah, I took
Ooh.
my family does. We do these trips. We'll rent a big house or whatever, and my wife and we decided, hey, we're gonna plan like a whole gauntlet of stuff for everybody, and we just told everybody we're planning games for this weekend. Nobody got to know what they were, but everybody has to agree to participate. We get there, we made these people do the most ridiculous stuff. We made them like eat Oreo, like move Oreos down their face and eat them. We made them like blindfold themselves and twirl them around a bunch and like sent them out like through an obstacle course. Like we did stuff like that, but we made sure they all had to agree before we got there. You're gonna play these games no matter what. So that's the best.
You sign a waiver that you will participate
Yeah.
in all the games.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah, and they're your family, so I mean, what are they gonna do? They're not gonna sue you, you know? Like you can make them do the most, and we filmed most of it. So,
That's
but
awesome.
yeah, Carrie, is there a memory? I don't know. This sounds very boastful, but is there a memory of like something we did together or of me that just like sticks out in your head?
Honestly, I think the main one is when we realized at our group co-op, there was like a recess period, and it was you, me, and another one of our friends who would hang out a lot. And there came a point, I think, where we all started wearing superhero shirts. Like, and I can't remember the order. I know one of our friend had a Flash shirt. I had a Batman shirt, and I think you had Green Lantern. I want to say I don't
I had Green Lantern. I also had Superman at one point
or
too.
Superman. Yeah, I can't quite remember, but we would like coordinate. And I remember a day where we coordinated that, and then we all wore. You guys had Vans, like cool kids. I had like the knockoff Payless versions of Vans, but they were bright green. And so I just remember for some reason we were so bored during that recess period that we like got like a whiteout marker and started just marking at my shoes, like drawing dots on them and signing them and like and I don't know why we did it. Couldn't tell you. I just remember having a really fun time and being like I felt included, and it was I always felt kind of outside, and like I had a really hard time making friends. It was just awkward. I mean, who wasn't at that age? But you were just always so fun and engaging, and it was just fun to hang out. And even if we were marking up my shoes for no apparent reason, it was like, oh, these people are cool. Like, these are my friends. Like, we can wear superhero shirts and laugh and have a good time, and it's like the best time. So that's one memory that definitely sticks out in my head. The weirdest thing, but that's one of the things I remember.
I think like it's so interesting now being an adult and having like kids in my life who are like you see kind of those weird like behaviors, right? Of like, oh, we're gonna do this thing that like to any normal person it's just like, why the heck would you do? Why would you draw all over your
Weird.
sneakers?
Yeah.
It's like weird behavior, but it's like, but yeah, to your point, I think back on those things now and I'm like, no, it's just like normal. It's just like we just thought this was cool,
Yeah.
so we just did it, and it builds
Yeah.
those friendships, right? It builds that like close knit. It's something obviously you remember significantly, and yeah, I do remember us all calling each other or texting each other and being like, "Hey, I'm wearing my Superman shirt today. Like, you should also wear your superhero stuff." Like, but okay,
Great.
Jenève, do you have any memories of Noah?
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll get into this more as we keep chatting, but what's interesting, I think, about like Noah and I's friendship, like I feel like it really like we really became friends like after college. Like I don't know if you would agree with that, Noah, but like
Yeah.
like connected
I mean, we
more
were like
on like
acquaintances. We were in the same circles like until then, but I feel like yeah.
yeah. it was like our families knew each other. We hung out a lot. We played similar game. Like we had these like, connecting experiences and stuff like that. But like as far as like friendship and talking about life stuff and finding similar interests and all these things like didn't really happen until like post college. So, um yeah, with that said, like I said, the karate stuff sticks out to me a lot, which Noah probably hates me for bringing all this up. But yeah, like I think there were definitely like activities that we did together. Like I think the watermelon game is
Yeah.
a great one. Another like his mom was really good at like doing group kid activity stuff too. And I think like something I remember about like really kind of like getting to know their family more and Noah more is like I forget what they were called, but they were like science days at the library or something. And we would all do like a game and a craft and like learn about like a bug or something. Like that was like the theme of the day or whatever. So yeah, there's definitely like these moments that are just like that's Noah's family, that's the Fontanas, like and how like
Right.
they play a part.
You kind of brought it up, but like you said like your relationship didn't maybe solidify into better friends until like college age.
Hmm.
So let's just go there. Why at that point did things become maybe different than just, hey, we're acquaintances or we are friends, but like, in a group setting, and now we're maybe more friends that are like one-on-one friends.
I can't tell you exactly Noah, feel free to jump in. I don't remember
No, I'm
exactly.
so curious to hear your answer.
Oh no, I'm being tested.
No, no,
Um,
no. I will wait. Can I jump in though?
yeah,
I
yeah,
was gonna
yeah.
say like as we were talking about not being as close to friends, like there were like it was like you said like definitely like we were like our families were like a staple in our lives. Like you
Hmm.
were the OGs that we were friends with, so it wasn't like it almost felt like we didn't have to try because it was just we were
Yes,
always
that's
like
a
our
good way to
paths were
put it.
always involved. So
Right.
Hmm.
um, it wasn't like I had a friend who lived in like New York, so that was a little bit more like we had to be more intentional about it. Like this was like
Mm,
we just did all of the activities together. Like I think our moms were like
yeah.
always course like talking and like trying to like line up our schedules. But then also
Hmm.
I was like in our junior senior banquet, like we were hanging out with each other the whole time. So I was like
Yeah, that's true.
maybe
Yeah.
we're just so much better friends now, but I feel like we
Yeah.
must have been pretty close in in general
Yeah.
standards or whatever like
Yeah, I
that.
feel like it's like different brands of friendship, I think. Like there's the
Yeah.
people that like feel like family and you're just like around whatever.
Yeah.
I remember we were both like I don't know what I don't know why. I can't remember the exact reason why we like reconnected, but I remember that we were talking about, I think it was like therapy or something. Like we had both gone to therapy. We were like, whoa, we have a friend that went to therapy. And then we like talked about some stuff. Like we were having like very similar processes around like how we thought about our expectations from our family and that and how difficult that was and like these expectations around like closeness or relationship with our siblings that like wasn't happening and we were both kind of, I mean, please correct me if I'm wrong, Noah, but I feel like we were both kind of wrestling with like why, like I know when we both moved away from home, so we were both like long distance, but we both cared about our families a lot and weren't able to like, I don't know, like maintain these like this ideal relationship or something that we wanted to have with our siblings and our family. And so I remember that was a big thing that we like connected over that sort of set the stage for like having these conversations around self reflection and self development and then tying in homeschooling too, just having somebody else who like had a similar experience to you in homeschooling because you were around like they know what it was like and then kind of
Yeah.
processing through a lot together.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it was like we had obviously like very similar childhoods, like growing up. Not even just being like homeschooled, but being in the same groups, and like our families are fairly similar in a lot of ways. And so like we had a good base work, like framework for friendship, and then I think we like didn't connect too much over like our college years, and then like kind of both like
Hmm.
went off, became adults, like did our own things, and then I think it was I forget why, but it was like I remember having like a phone call with you and we were
Mm-hmm.
just like, oh, like it would be cool to catch up, like see how we're doing and everything like that. Like it's been like forever since we've talked to each other. Like let's talk. And I think like that was that phone call that you're talking about where we're like, oh, you've been to therapy. Oh, you've done like, oh wow, like we have all this history together, and then now we're also in like a similar season in our life right now, like different like similar phases, and we're like, oh, we actually have so much in common currently.
Mm.
So it's
Right.
not just
Mm-hmm.
like all history. It's like, and I think that was at least what I remember standing out was like, oh, this is somebody I could easily talk to. We're both trying to figure out our adulting life at the same
Mm-hmm.
time. We're dealing with, like you said, similar things. And then
Yeah.
that was kind of like the start of it. And then I remember we just started like talking on the phone because you were maybe in Colorado at the time. I was definitely in
Mm-hmm.
California, I remember. And so it's just like, oh, this is somebody like while we're navigating like dating in our different states and like friendships and job stuff and everything like that, we were talking, but it was like we were both kind of going at it at the same time. And so it was nice to, yeah, have somebody to
Yeah.
talk to
Yeah.
like that.
Preparing for this episode, I was thinking a lot about like the same question for myself and Carrie of like where was it that like things maybe shifted a little bit because like yeah,
Mm-hmm.
we were good friends, but like I very vividly remember coming home from college. I went to college. I moved to Illinois, and coming home and like all of my friends had just kind of gone on with their life, and like I felt like kind of forgotten me in a lot of senses
Mm-hmm.
because just wasn't there on a day to day. And Carrie was one of the few people who I'd come home and I'd see her and we'd hang out. And I very vividly remember I think it was summer break, I just was really depressed. And she was one of the few people I texted one night super late. And I was like, hey, I'm going to go to the movies. Do you want to go? And her and another friend of ours was like, hell yeah, let's do it. And that alone,
Mm-hmm.
I think solidified like, okay, this is more than just we're friends. This is like, we are we are better friends. And so it became a point of like anytime I would go home, this is somebody I want to see, this is somebody I want to reconnect with. We talk on the phone, we text each other, like all that kind of thing. And so it became like that next level of friendship, I think, that you guys are kind of describing of like
Mm-hmm.
we started to then reconnect on things that were just changing because we were adults, we were moving out of our homes, we were like starting life,
Yeah.
having romantic partners and stuff like that. So
Mm.
Carrie, you have anything to add to that?
No, I think you said it perfectly. I kind of forgot about that movie. Was that we saw like I think it was The Book Thief or something like really random. But yeah, every time you
Yeah.
would come back, it was just like, like you said, you go through your adult life and you're learning and experiencing new things and new situations, and not that you forget your childhood friends, but you're just moving through life. And then that was always something that whenever you come back or to visit, it was just like, oh, great, like let's hang out, let's catch up. And it's just
Mm.
always been such a steady relationship for me, for sure, that I can always count on. Of just like, oh, like, and it's hard to remember because we live so far apart, but it's like, yeah, they're always there, and every conversation we have is just picking back up where we left off, and it's really special to have that.
Well, and like Carrie's somebody that like so my grandfather died this year, and she was somebody that like I just you know family dying is always very tough, but I like called her the next day because I was just having a bad day and I really didn't want to talk about it, but she was there to just like shoot the shit with me, and just like we just talked about happy stuff, and Carrie's getting married and like wedding plans and like stuff like that. And it wasn't until later that she like I didn't even say like my grandpa died yesterday kind of a deal. I just was like
No,
I needed
I had no idea.
something not that. And like Carrie
Yeah,
felt bad. She was like, I should have said something. And I was like, well, I didn't tell you because I just didn't that's not what I needed
we talked
from
for like
her
three
as a
hours,
friend
and
at
I,
that
I was
moment.
just like, wait,
Yeah.
what? I'm
But I
so
just
sorry.
needed
Like, I had
to
no
It's like
idea.
honestly, I was just
no.
like, all right, so I gotta go, but also my grandmother died. Like,
Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah,
like what?
gosh.
It I felt shitty afterwards because I was like I probably should have
but
said
it's
that.
okay
But
because
like
you
in that
needed
moment
that, and like,
Yeah.
yeah, I had been dealing with that shit
yeah.
for like over a week. I just did not
Mm.
want to talk about it anymore. And so
Mm.
I just needed somebody who was not going to talk about it. We could talk about other stuff and it was totally fine. And
Yeah.
so Carrie
That
was
was
that
great.
person for me. And so,
Yeah,
yeah, exactly. And like she said, we talked for 3 hours on the phone, like,
Mm.
and it was not intended to be 3 hours. It just was like, hey, like it ended up being 3 hours. So I'm, I'm curious, like, as we've kind of like, again, like relationships have solidified a little bit more, right? And we've become better friends as time has gone on. One of the things that stands out to me is that like we're also like friends of the opposite sex. And I don't know about I know based on talking with Jenève and Noah before, like you guys also had like religion was a little bit part of the homeschool experience for you guys and played a role in that. I know for like Cari and I, religion was a big part. And there was always, to me, there was this stigma around like guys and girls being friends. And, I think kids tend to do this whole like, oh, well, maybe they like each other because they're like friends and they hang out or whatever. Like I had that with a lot. I had a lot of female friends, and so I would just always get this like Jacob's dating this girl now. It's like no, he's not. He's just friends with that person. But
You talk about yourself in the third person. No, Jacob is not dating.
Yeah, Jacob does not. Yeah, he
He's
does
not.
not date people at all, which is kind of true. Yeah, that's a whole nother rabbit hole. Like I didn't date until I was in college, kind of deal. But I
was like,
am
wait, aren't you
curious.
married? No.
I am now. Yeah.
Yeah, just
We
skip
never
right
dated
down.
though.
Yeah.
Yeah, we stepped straight to marriage. But I think, but there's kind of a weird dynamic when it comes to that because we hear a lot of stories, two guys being best friends, two girls being best friends, that kind of a deal. But like, I'm curious, I just curious about that dynamic of like, was there anything like that for you guys ever of like people being like, are you more than like friends? Are you, I don't really know what the question is here. I'm just
I know what you're
interested
saying,
about
yeah.
that dynamic. Yeah.
I mean, I think like I said, like before, like we've already said, we because we weren't like super close, like in those years, I think when a lot of kids are just like, ooh, like whatever, like two people of the opposite sex hanging out, but like because we weren't like really didn't. Our friendship didn't blossom until after college. I feel like it was at that point. I don't know. I think I grew a lot out of that too because I was definitely in that camp of like, the 6 inches situation. Like I don't. It's so weird, but whatever. Anyway, like
Red and
that
blue,
whole
don't
world,
make purple. Yeah.
yeah, that whole thing. Yeah. That I think I was a little more like grounded with that, and so it just wasn't as. I don't know. I wasn't as phased by it, but we've always been like long distance friends through that part of our friendship too, which I think is interesting. Like we've always had like phone calls, or we use like Marco Polo a lot. It's like the video app thing, and that so you don't really have an opportunity for people to be like, oh, it's like hanging out a lot with that person. So I don't know. I think there's some freedom in that in a way that I appreciate, especially coming from like Jacob, like that background that you said, where it's like all about like image and like what are you communicating to your community and blah blah blah. Like it's been really nice to just like feel like, oh, we can just have a friendship and not have like outside judgment from like a homeschool group or your close friends.
Yeah, because I know like the reason I bring that up too is that like as I've said multiple times already, like Cari and I went to prom together. When Cari invited me to come to prom, like one of the things that she said on the phone was like, "But we're just friends," and I was like, "Yeah, first of all, it doesn't need to be said, but like
Yeah, same to you, Cari.
yeah, same to you."
And then Carrie's like, "Gee,
but,
thanks."
But I had to do the same thing because the next year when I went to prom, when I asked a girl out to prom, like I did the same thing of like, hey, like, well, we're just going as friends, kind of a deal. And so there was always within our friend bubble, I think there was kind of this like stipulations of like, hey, like guys and girls can be friends, but you have to make it very, very obvious that you are. And it's interesting now because I just don't hold that same value of like. It's not an issue. I have plenty of female friends, and I'm totally cool with my wife having male friends. Like it just is what it is. It's not an issue. So I was just curious on people's perspective on that. I don't know. Cari, you got anything? Noah, you got anything on that?
I feel like I was so growing up in that where it was like a guy and a girl hanging out. It was like, are they dating? Well, and that was like the big question. I was so worried about not appearing that way that it was like, we're friends. And it was very funny going to prom because it's like, in my head, I thought, oh, this is going to look like a date. This is going to look like something more. And it wouldn't have been bad if it looked that way, but I was so worried about no offense, my actual crush seeing me taking to prom, who I was not going to ask my actual crush. So I'm going to ask my really good friend who I knew would be the most amazing time. It's just, it's funny to think about how obsessed, at least for me personally, I was with like the image of it all. And it's like you said, Jacob, now I have male friends. My fiance has female friends. Like it's not an issue. And it's just weird for me to ponder how much of an issue it was for me back then of just like, oh, I don't want to, I have a crush on this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, and just the male species is confusing and these feelings are weird, but like it was just so I was so worried about how that looked, and it's like
Mm.
we had a great time at prom as friends. It was just two friends hanging out, dancing, like eating,
Yeah.
whatever, and it was just like I remember feeling so I was so nervous at the beginning, but I just at the end felt so like reassured of like, wow, this is great. Like no
Yeah.
pressure, that it was just fun. And I
Mm.
wish I would have given
Yeah.
myself a lot more grace back. I mean, you're a teenager, so there's absolute everything's so wired and just
Yeah.
wacky in my brain.
Mm.
But at that point, but it's like it's okay. Guys can be friends with girls. Like you can be friends if you have a friend. It doesn't really matter what their gender is.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
I learned that a lot later in life. It was like, oh, it's fine.
Well,
Mm.
it's interesting because our friends that we went with to prom, they were into each other. And so the dynamic of the evening was very different for them versus for us.
Yup.
Because like by the end of it, like
So
Carrie
funny.
and I are like killing it on the dance floor, we're having a great time, we're laughing, we're joking, like because we're friends. We know how to do that. And like for them, it's this awkward, like, will they, won't
It was
they
so
type of
awkward.
Mm.
scenario
Yeah.
where it's just like you can tell that they're both extremely nervous and wanting maybe more of a movie like prom experience to happen and play out in
Mm.
that evening. But when you grow up in a very Christian centric culture, everything is
Mhm.
watched. You're just very like, I don't know. We had lots of
Yeah.
chaperones. We had lots of just, that kind of a thing. And so, yeah,
Mm.
our whole homeschool environment was really built around this idea that like guys and girls can't really be friends or have to be friends from a distance
Mhm.
or in group settings. And so it's been an interesting thing to unpack that as we've become adults now where we can enter into that like,
Mm.
no, we can just be friends, like plain and simple.
I think my parents were kind of like hands off when it came to dating. Like I had like crushes and stuff, but it almost was like it never even got to that point because they were put so much emphasis on like becoming like they almost encouraged. I feel like they encouraged us to be friends with people of the opposite sex, and like encouraging just like general respect and just like treating people like you're gonna have to see these people next week or tomorrow or whatever like that. You're like they're friends with your sister or whatever, like and like all this stuff. So it was more like being intentional and I think laying like they never said they were against dating, but I didn't end up dating anyone anyway. But it was like I don't know. I remember one time my mom had me bring my sister on this like non-date date with this girl because she was like, "Do you actually like this girl?" Or like, because it seems like she probably likes you, but like if you're not really 100% on what your intentions are, like maybe bring your sister to like make sure it's not. I don't know. It made it more confusing, but it was a whole hot mess. But it was just like very much like there's no rush to date. Like there shouldn't be any rush to
Mm.
date, and like you cannot like what are you even gonna do? And so it's like you might as well just become really good friends with these people first, and like see how that relationship works, and if you can be friends and hang out with them, because that's essentially what the
Mm.
majority of like relationships kind of looks like is like you're
Mm.
doing day to day stuff, like normal stuff. So um, I feel like that was how it kind of was for me. Was it wasn't like no dating, but it was like just don't just jump into like the physical parts of dating, right off the bat, because like
Mhm.
that's gonna end up being messier in the end if things don't work out.
I feel like my parents had a very similar take on it because they were like, yeah, it's all friendship based. They're like our relationship is we're friends. We go out, we do stuff together, we go on dates, we go to the movies, whatever, and they're like we like each other. And then there's, the more physical stuff comes after that. And so it was always interesting because they encourage that type of relationship with me and my friends and, just be friends, just have fun. And so when I say that, like, the culture we grew up in was very like, guys and girls can't be friends. A lot of that doesn't stem from my house. It stems from the society that we were a part
Mhm.
of. To the point where it's like I had female friends like Carrie. Carrie and I would go get coffee or we go get whatever. And like, if a homeschool family saw you out, then it starts to spark the rumors like we were talking about of like, are they dating? Are they seeing each other? Why are they alone? Like all those types of things. It's this really weird tattletale culture that got built
Mm.
inside of Achieve, which was our homeschool association. And so
It was kind
yeah,
of
looking back on it, I'm
a
like, there's
nice
certain moms
flex.
that I'm like, screw you.
Yeah, I was gonna. It's so nice to be able to just be like, no, we're actually just friends, and like you guys are like losing
Yeah.
your shit over this, but like we're actually
Mm.
calm
Yeah.
throughout the entire thing,
Yeah,
and we're not caught up
exactly.
in the drama.
I could keep it in my pants for all intents and purposes. Was like the way I viewed it was I was just like, God,
Yeah,
like it just was annoying. It's like I'd get my mom would get calls. We saw Jacob at this coffee shop with so and so. Are they
Oh
are they
my
dating? And
gosh.
it's like, no. My
yeah,
So
Oh.
anyway,
Also, none
that's
of your
my trauma.
business.
If you can't tell, someone needs to go to therapy and work through some of this stuff.
yeah.
Well, I was gonna say I
Let's hear
feel
the
like a
bomb.
lot of this it's not a bomb. It's
Yeah.
just like
Yeah, drop it.
I am curious on your guys' thoughts about this, but like I feel like America is so like we over sexualize everything. And I think what's like really interesting is like even our America's like judgments on European culture. It's like they're so like romantic, like we call them like this romantic, the romantic like vibe, but like we're more obsessed with it. That's like it's not like a normal part of life here, I feel like. And it's always and I feel like when you add the religious Christian stuff on top of that, it kind of equals this bizarre like strong suppression like against like any kind of sexual expression, and it makes it like a bigger deal when it's not. Like it's just like okay, so like you held hands with a girl at a coffee shop, like big whoop, like you know what I mean? I don't know. Like it just
Yeah.
I feel like there for me something I learned about kind of like what you were saying, Jacob, it like wasn't necessarily from my home. It was like sometimes from like your homeschool culture that you're in. But I was like, there was an obsession with this. Like with people not like, oh, are they like you're putting focus on it. And the irony is it's like you're putting focus on it and you're scared of it and all this stuff and like it's all you think about because it's so scary and it's just like oh my gosh, like I just wonder sometimes. I'm like what would it have looked like for like a homeschool choir rehearsal to like actually to be not focusing on that and like not everybody like judging each other for who they're talking to or whatever, sitting outside with eating lunch together or whatever. um it's just so interesting. I think it's just one of those like paradoxes of humanity. It's like, well, we can't have that. It's like, well, you seem pretty into that if you need to push it away so much. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's like,
Yeah.
I loved that take because it's something I forget about. Because what you grow up in the middle of, you don't think, like, I didn't think about it or think it was an issue or a bigger situation
mm,
until I got out of it. And it's
yeah.
so great that you say it because I do think a lot of it, for myself, I've talked about this on our podcast episode, I think briefly.
Mm,
Every school dance that we went to, the women, the men too, but the females especially were very, we had a very strict dress code and it was so emphasized like, do not distract the
mm,
opposite sex do with what you wear. Do not wear a spaghetti strap. You have to wear a strap this thick, or don't wear a dress that's 3 inches above your knees because you're going to cause your fellow brothers in Christ to stray. But there was always this emphasis on how you dress, how you act, be a modest
mm,
woman. Just like you said, it's so hypersexualized and so focused on it.
mm,
And also for me, growing up in a house that we didn't really talk about sex and relationships and what that looks like, it felt very taboo. And so I discovered a lot of things on my own about it, um, in many ways that probably were not the best. And so I wonder, like, man, I was so hyper focused on guys and having crushes and who likes this person. And it was crazy if, Jacob was at a coffee shop with this person. Like, are they dating? Are they not? It's like, that was all I could focus on. You
Mhm.
know, and not
Yeah.
just Jacob, other people, obviously.
Jacob's just going to a lot of coffee
But it's like,
shops.
No, it's I did like
but
you know
yeah,
it just was
but you
normal
think
like
about it now, like,
Yeah.
why were we so hyper focused on that when, like you
yeah
said, why couldn't we go to a theater practice for our show that we were putting on in 2 weeks? And why was I focused on the fact that my character had to put their hand on the fellow actor's chest, and I was so scared to do it because, oh, this is the first time I'm touching a boy. Like, why wasn't
Wow.
I
Yeah.
focusing on just the acting? Like, you're acting, we're
Mhm.
having fun as friends, this is great. Like, you know, it's crazy to think about, and I am very glad that you brought that up, Jenève, because it's something I don't always think about, didn't know when I was very young, and now as an adult looking at it, like, why did we hypersexualize everything?
Yeah.
You know,
yeah
it's
Can
just,
you-
and I don't know if that looks like the same in public schools or if it's just kind
Right.
of a homeschool religion. I don't know. There's a deep dive into
Yeah.
that, but
It makes you
thank you
feel
for
so
bringing
much
up that
shame
point,
too, I
because
would
that was
imagine.
really, I liked that point.
No, thanks.
Yeah.
No, what
bomb
were you
just
about to
dropped.
say?
Yeah, no, just that I feel like with that to your point, like I didn't even all the straps and everything like that. It's like you're sexualizing a piece of clothing, which is like not doesn't have to be, but then also you like there's so much shame that everyone probably felt for feeling anything, you know, like if you like somebody, you're like, oh, I shouldn't feel this way, or like, you know, and like any kind of, which is a
A lot
natural
of shame.
thing. Yeah.
yeah I think too like something that happened to me recently is like I still go back to like the awkward Christian side hug is what is labeled in my house, and like you know it's like you don't hug a
Those-
girl just straight on because you know that's inappropriate and you're gonna feel things that you
No.
shouldn't feel and whatever, and it's
Or
like
if you do, keep your hips apart.
oh my god yeah TP it like
Just,
yeah
you know,
leave room for Jesus
The
in there.
shoulder
leave room for
touch.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No purple.
Yeah. And so like I'm really bad at giving hugs. Like I just know that about who I am as a person. And so it was interesting because I recently had someone who just like I gave them a hug and I thought I just went into, you know, my normal programmed mode and they're like, what the fuck was that?
Yeah.
Like they were like and like I was like, what? And they're like, hug me, like give me a normal hug. And I was like, I don't think I know how to do that. And they're like, here, I'll show you. You know, kind of a deal. And it's like
This
it's
is an
just so
embrace.
ingrained, yeah, into who we are, and to both of the girls' points, it's like you know, also like the hypersexualization of girls. It's like, you know, I don't know about you, Noah. I was very much taught from my church and the leadership, you know, Christian leaders and stuff that it was like guys are just like uncontrollable. Like we don't have an off switch. We don't have, and this is the whole purity culture thing, right? Of like, we don't have an off switch, but we have to remain sexually pure and like all these different things. And it's like very much an emphasis on like, it's a girl's responsibility to like present herself in a way that is clean and is good and is pure and all of these things. And like you as a guy, like your job is just to like try your hardest not to like give in to the urges in a lot of ways. And
Very Adam
I'm so
and Eve.
thankful. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Started
I'm so
from there.
thankful.
So very
Yeah.
beginning.
Exactly. Watch out, you know. 'Cause
Yeah.
If she wears that straplet, whatever, like then it's out of your hands, you know. You're
Yes.
done for.
Game
Yep.
over.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
game over.
And so I'm so thankful. Like it's funny because I've told my dad this multiple times, and he just doesn't even remember telling me this. But he had told me when I hit like 13, he was like, "Hey, there's like context to when is and isn't a sexual situation." And we grew up in California, so it was like, you're gonna go to the beach, you're gonna see girls in bikinis. Like that's not a sexual situation. That's just people being people at the beach in a bathing suit. Not a big deal. You know, move on from it. And like that small piece of advice that like a lot of other guys that I knew didn't ever get, the context piece, like changed a lot of the trajectory of like I think who I am as a person, because it got blown out of proportion that like every situation, like you were saying, Jenève, is like a sexual situation. And it's like that's not true. It's just what we have conditioned everyone to believe, that it's just all sex all the time. You know, guys can't go, what is it, 0.6 seconds without like thinking about sex. Like it's ridiculous, right? It's like we've built that. That's, you know, we can change it. We should change it.
Yeah.
I don't know. The over sexualization also plays into a little bit of like sexism a little bit too. I think like just subtle things. But
Yeah, guys were never
I
told to not dress too sexy, you know?
Yeah,
yeah, like stuff like
I could
that.
wear shortest shorts I wanted to wear. It was never an issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can tell you one thing. Guys were not given giant baggy t-shirts to put over their dresses
Oh my
if they,
gosh.
well, they wouldn't, wouldn't,
That's
guys wouldn't have been
crazy.
allowed to wear dresses too.
Yeah.
But if you were wearing spaghetti straps, it's like, here's a big t-shirt, or,
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, you can
Might
wear
just
short
painted a
shorts, it's
big,
fine. But
yeah,
I'm
A
curious that
on it.
like so I think both Jacob and Noah, you guys were talking about how like your parents were kind of leaned towards like when you did like someone, they're like you should be friends or whatever. Like I had a moment like that with my parents where it was like the first time I was sharing that I had a crush on somebody. And I was like, I came to my mom and I was like, I think I have a crush on this guy. And like her discomfort was so palpable. But like I'm also her first kid. So it's like I understood that like I'm the guinea pig, right? And she's just like, whoa, I have to deal with this. And I just remember her being like, wow, like that's nice. Like, well, you should just be really good friends. And I was like, okay. But like there was obviously conflict with that with like the homeschool like bigger culture vibe of like friends is the opposite of the bad dating, you know what I mean? It was just like this is safe and this isn't. So when that like blended, I was like, what, like how does that even work, and
Yeah.
I think that kind of affected how I mean, it definitely affected how I approach dating. And for me, I've really pretty much dated only in college. I did the friend thing for so long, like all of these dating, and the guys are just like, "What is wrong with you? Are you 12?" Like, for the like how, because I was just like, I guess if you like somebody, you just have to be their friend, like for a while, and one day magically they're gonna think that you reciprocate like attraction. Like I don't know. It was just I felt like there was a missed opportunity in like teaching people like how to like be respectful and like be attracted to somebody and that's okay. Like and how do you I don't know, navigate that instead of just be friends. I just think like no judgment on like on my mom for doing I know like this is her first situation and everything, but it did like 100% make me think of like how I would might want to handle that differently.
The college I went to was also a Christian college, so I kept
Right.
all of those ideals
Yes. Okay.
from high school and took that directly into college. And so there was a lot of that, like still like, hey, we're like really good friends, and
Mm.
it's like privately we're telling people like I have a huge crush on this person. And I
Yeah.
remember one of my friends, he had this huge crush on this girl. We figured out she also had a huge crush on him, and they would just not. We gave them every opportunity to like break past the like we're friends into like let's make out, like let's hold hands, like just like cross the boundary finally. And they wouldn't do it. And like we would spy on them. We would like we were again really awkward Christian homeschool kids, but like it that we were like just take the move, like just do the move. And finally, what it took was like a bunch of guys going in. He was, I think, asleep, and we like went in his room. We woke him up, and we were like, "Look, you either make a move, or she's gonna not stick around. Like you got one chance to finally do something about it." And he took it, and now they're married. But it's like
Oh, cool.
it
Wow.
is kind of that like you were saying, like there's that waiting of like I need them to give me some kind of sign, and it just is like I don't think that's
Yeah.
totally how it works. Sometimes you just gotta
No.
like shoot the shot and like
Right.
hope. I mean, this has also come from someone I took way too long to kiss, people to hold hands to do all that stuff because
Mhm.
I just was like, I don't know what I'm doing.
Mhm. Yeah. No, I agree with that.
It's like such a fine line of like as I'm hearing like everyone talk about it, it's like of are you setting the groundwork for a healthy relationship by being more friends and building that connection first, or
Mm.
are you like kind of like to what Carrie was saying about like the over sexualizing like the clothes and everything, like are you over emphasizing
Mm.
like physical intimacy to the point where it's like you wait so long because it's such a you make it out to be something huge, where it's not necessarily that big of a deal. But at the same time, yeah, it's fine like finding that like in between where it's like where is like the healthy way to do this and navigate that. And how would you and I'm sure at like different ages of our childhood, it's like obviously when you're like 14 or 13, like that's too early, I would say, to
Right.
like be jumping into like a super physical relationship, but at the same time, that changes drastically by the time you're in college. So it's like to still be doing that same approach in college is like that's a little
Mm-hmm.
bit it's interesting. Yeah, I don't know. That's
Yeah.
what I was thinking
Yeah.
because I was like, is it a good thing to be like be friends and like build that relationship, or is it could? And I think that's the trick of like each kid internalizes that stuff. There's teachings differently, you know, where it's like
Mm.
um,
Yeah.
it's some kids take it really to heart. Like I feel like I was more that type in that category, whereas other kids took it as like a challenge to like push back against that even further, you
Mm.
know? Yeah.
Well, like a great example of that, I think, is like, well, one, I mean, we all kind of grew up in the era of like I kissed dating goodbye. That was a big thing for a lot of
Mhm.
the homeschool world, and like the purity culture movement and things like that. But like I even think about like my dad came to me when I was a freshman in high school and was just like, hey, like now I realize that what he was telling me was like the reason I wouldn't date while I'm in high school is because XYZ. He was like, I think you're going to go away to college. Like, you don't want to do the long distance thing. Like, take it from somebody who did that. You know, like, he was trying to warn me of, like, if you do this, you set yourself up for these kind of struggles in the future. I don't want that for you.
Mm.
What I heard was, I'm asking you not to date at all in high school. And so I just took that and was like, hell yeah, let's, okay, that's fine. I was like 14. I didn't really care at that point. So I was like, yeah, I don't, girls, that's kind of gross. Like I just was like, I'm not into this quite yet. So, but by the time I was 18, I was like, man, what am I doing? Like, I like
Mm.
these people. I want there to be more there, but like, I felt this limitation of I can only be friends with them.
Mm.
And then once I'm out, then I'm free to date. And so it made it really awkward because there was no experience. There was none of that. Like, kind of getting to like in a lot of ways experiment in high school and kind of do the like much more low pressure like, hey, this is like what holding hands is, this is maybe what like a little bit of making out is. Like I didn't get to do any of that, so I experienced all that in college.
Mm.
And didn't always go well. So yeah.
No, I was just thinking like this sentiment, and I grapple with this a lot and at different points in my life, but like Jacob, what you just said about your dad being like, I don't want this pain for you. Like I don't want you to have this struggle, you know? Um, I wonder how much I think like that is a really popular sentiment in homeschool families because I think there is a lot of this like protection vibe a little bit. Like that's why like I think I've heard a lot before like oh you're sheltered like that word and like because your parents care about your education style. That always like offended me because I was like it's not always just about like fear and protection. Sometimes it's just intentional. Sometimes parents just want you know your upbringing to be a certain way. However, I do think there is this undercurrent of like I don't want you to have to experience pain. And like I don't know, I guess I'm of the thought process or the belief that there just is pain in the world in life. Like you're gonna have really difficult times. And I think like my first kind of heartbreak type of thing was in high school, and it was from like probably exactly that, Jacob. Like the you know had like a crush that I couldn't really ever date this person, and it was always weird. And it was a very hidden, like mysterious love, and like and then you like go away to
Yeah.
college, and like nothing happens, and then it's heartbreaking. But then
Right.
there's a part of me that's like I don't know. I think we grow from those experiences. And I think that, like, in a weird way, the earlier that you can experience that safely, like, have heartbreak at home, have heartbreak around really good friends that care about you, you, like, learn how to navigate that better. And I just, yeah, that's a big, like, gap, I think, in the homeschool experience. It's like, be ready for painful things. Be like equip yourselves with how to like learn how to navigate them. And like I don't know. I'm
Yeah.
grateful for the painful things in my life, but like and I understand the sentiment. I'm not trying to like knock it too much, but it
Yeah.
just made me think of that.
Well, I think you're onto something with like the homeschool like parents wanting to protect their kids, right? That is like you talk to any homeschool parent, that's the core of what they want, right? I don't want my kid to struggle with this. I don't want my kid to suffer from bullying or this or that or indoctrination. Like even the stuff that like we would maybe label as like, okay, that's kind of bullshit. Like it's a
Mm.
protection thing. It's a I don't want them to have this hardship thing. But
Yes.
like to your point, life is hardship. Like there is just inevitably stuff is going to happen, and so like it's a hard thing to kind of be like yeah, I get it, but like also we need to build those systems in place. Maybe systems is probably the wrong word there, but we need to build an
I
environment in
don't
which
know.
it's like
Yeah.
kids can experience some of that, but it's within the safety of like they have actually, you know, backup for like
Hmm.
like you said, the friends they have, their parents they have, whoever can kind of help walk them through that heartbreak, that
Hmm.
getting bullied at school, that whatever it is, those difficult things in life. That's what's gonna make them a stronger person ultimately, as opposed to we see homeschool kids who have never experienced any of that heartache stuff. They get thrown in the real world and then like they screw up. They're a mess, and it's like
Mm.
it's really hard to like they still live in a perfect little bubble in their head, even though it's like that's not what's happening. Like wake up, hello.
Mm.
So
When Jenève was saying that awesome point, I thought of as well, the older I got and the more I heard stories about fellow homeschool parents, you know, growing up in that, I never really cared about the parents. It was always about the people my own age. It was like the parents were the teachers, all this stuff. They were cool. But as
Mm.
I grew older and started finding out a lot of things about the most sheltering and uh, the most parents, I don't know how to grammatically say this, the parents who sheltered their kids like the most in the most intense ways were the parents who were trying to shield them from stuff that they had gone through, and
right.
Mm.
they weren't telling us as kids what they'd gone through. Parents who had had abortions, parents who had had
Mm.
severe drug and alcohol abuse situations, parents just the sexual assault, like the
Mm.
list goes on. And I feel like a lot of the most sheltered kids I knew came from parents who were fighting for every reason so that one, their kid wouldn't find out, but two, their kid wouldn't experience what they went through.
Mm.
And and like you said, I think there was so much sheltering that you have to go through pain and hardship in life, but you ultimately, the majority, I feel like, will always learn from the pain and hardship that they
Mm.
go through.
Mhm.
And for myself, there was a lot of issues where I had this pretty obsessive crush and I didn't know how to handle it. And so I went about it in a very obsessive and not great way. And I would get in trouble for some of the things I did or some of the ways I acted.
Mm.
And like you also said, that caused immense heartbreak and that was hard. And I feel like my parents did help me through those heartbreaks. And every heartbreak that I've known in my life has always eventually led to me learning from the situation.
Mm.
And unfortunately, it's with dating and the opposite gender and everything, like it's been a lot of heartbreak and learning for myself, because of certain things that just wasn't talked about. But now I can say all of those heartbreaks and all those painful moments absolutely helped me in my current relationship now.
Mm.
But I think it's just so interesting because there were different levels of being sheltered, like you said. There, like, I wasn't allowed to watch scary movies, or I wasn't allowed to watch certain movies that other people would probably deem not scary. Um, and then some kids were like so like sheltered to the point of it just felt so like, why do you feel the need to shelter them in that way?
Mm.
Like, why don't you allow them to do XYZ? And I learned a lot later, like, oh, that mom went through, she forbids her kids to date, but because she dated and had a horrible experience with this,
Mm.
she doesn't want her kid to have that. And I guess that goes for that all parents are, I mean, not all parents, but majority of parents, I feel like, are always they want the best for their kids. And
Yeah.
it was just, yeah, you're so right about the fact that when you're so sheltered from any pain, and like you have to try some things and you have to learn on your own and you have to make mistakes in order to get better. That's just kind of how life goes. But when you grow up your whole primitive years of like, don't make mistakes, don't go out with that boy because a mistake could happen.
Mm-hmm.
There has to be some middle ground. It can't really be all or nothing. And we really lived in such a black and white culture
Yeah.
on so many levels. It's hard to unpack that, and it's hard to go through that now as an adult. Like, oh wait, it's not all black and white. Like, it's not. There are a lot of gray areas.
I think to your point, Cari, is like you were talking about like we weren't privy to the parents' experience, right? And so that's part of like I think
That's
why
a great
our
way to summarize
generation
what I just rambled
is
about.
like
No, it's good. It's good.
Thank you.
no
Yeah.
like but like because we're not privy to it, like it's that seems like such a weird word to add. Okay, sorry.
But yeah,
You said it too many
There's
times
my
now.
ADHD brain kicking off for a second there.
Privy.
But because we don't know their experience and because they're unwilling to share it with us, I think that's why like our generation tends to be much more like, hey, let's talk about these things. Let's like, I mean, it's like all of us opening up today. It's like these are things that are tough conversations that maybe our parents didn't totally have with us, And I think about
That's why all of us like podcasts so much.
Yeah, exactly. But like I think about like the things that my dad struggled with, and like or my mom, and it's like as I learn those things and we talk about them, and it's like whatever. I understand. I start to understand that it's like, hey, if you talked to me about this, it actually would have helped me not go down that path, and not do this thing or not do that, because like you're saying you experienced it, how was it for you? How do I navigate that? And, it's like, at the end of the day, everyone still gets to make their own decisions, but it's like, we can't, I think too many parents went down the rabbit hole of like, I just need to protect them from everything and they never need to know any of it. And like, sorry, that's just not the way the world is going to work. You're going to get chewed up, spit out, stomped on, like it's going to happen. But we can alleviate some of it by sharing our experiences and saying, this happened to me, like this is what I would do differently, and give kids and give young adults the ability to like learn from that lesson and have a toolkit to go out and actually be prepared for it, because like stomping out with the Bible and saying I'm going to defend my faith is like just not enough. It's not enough of a toolkit.
Yeah, I like that you brought up all those like sensitive topics too, Cari, of like how serious it is, like where these parents are coming from with their protections. I think like as a kid you're thinking like, oh, my mom just like has it all together and wants me to have it all together, like when you're a kid, and it's like I might not want that, but it's actually like no, they have a whole life that they lived, I think that nuance is important to remember. And I don't know, I think what's sad to me about both the religion culture and the homeschooling culture is like the judgment and the shame. And that's what prevents, I think, even parents from doing what you said, Jacob, like being just honest with their kids and honest about like, hey, this is how I messed up and this is how it didn't go quite the way I would have liked. And this is my attempt at helping you have a better path. And just being like humble about that. It's like, yeah, I might not know the best way, but this is why I'm pitching this to you. It's like, know?
As an adult, I've found it really nice too, because I mean, I'm in my 30s and I'm very close with my parents, and I find it really healing for us to be able to, because they know at this, when I was a teenager, you try to keep everything from your parents. No, I tried this or I did this and I don't want to tell them, because I'll get in trouble, this and that. And as an adult, my parents respect that I live my adult life. They have theirs, that I've taken some things from their teachings and applied it to my own life. And some things I've chosen to, go differently, as growing up does. But I have found those conversations really healing to have with my parents, where we can now open up and I feel comfortable asking them, oh, like, well, did you experience this? Like, how, and as they feel more able to open up, because it's like not saying, and she's a lost cause, but meaning to say that they are like, what, we can just have a healthy conversation, like you said, but like this podcast does, and being able to have those open and honest conversations, because I know their generation, they grew up, you didn't talk about things were so taboo. You just, mental health wasn't even discussed. So many things were not discussed. And so it's really healing. I think I would hope for them as well as it is for me to be able to be open and honest and have good, healthy conversations as an adult about past things, or, remember when I did this as a kid? Like, how would you have handled that? Or
it's interesting to relive some of those things, like, with them, like, and talk about, like, what would be different now. And, like, because I've done that same thing, Cari, of, like, kind of trying to heal maybe some of that stuff by being like, okay, look, I made this decision when I was in high school. What if I had come to you and talked to you about it? What would we do differently? How would this, and to walk through those, and it's not always perfect, but it's definitely, like, it's a nice thought experiment sometimes to just kind of, like, talk it through. And, like, I don't know, I'm big right now on the, like, healing little Jakey, and just, like, hugging my younger self in a lot of ways, and being the thing that he needed, that he was unable to communicate when he was younger. And so it's one of those things now where it's like, I like working those thought experiments out, because it's just, like, I don't know, it helps me deal with that, and then moving forward, I'm not trying to stay stuck in the past, but
an adult Jake hugging little Jakey, and both of you being awkward and not knowing how to hug.
Yeah, it's a side hug. Yeah, it's a side hug. Yeah, I'm like high-fiving. I'm like, hey,
That's
bud,
great.
what's up? Yeah, like, it's like
and
super
he's like,
awkward.
adult me really doesn't know how to hug. Okay.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm a kid, but I even
Guess
know
I
that.
never learned that.
Yeah. It's like, who is
Well,
this
you
weirdo?
never learned that one. Yeah.
Oh my God.